Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, sponsored by Fieldstone Communities, Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care, and they're now accepting residents. They also offer day stay and respite programs. So call 360-689-4314 to schedule a tour of their beautiful grounds today. Occasionally, I would also like to acknowledge that the Senior Community Center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water. We honor them and are grateful for their hospitality. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you David Harrison. He's a prognosticator. Well, how do you say that word? Anyhow, a political person that lets us know what's going to happen in the future. You're doing a pretty darn good job, David.
I am.
Yes,
So far. That could stop just at the wrong time, though. So, as some people are joining us that aren't here every month, so I'll remind us that we do 3 topics each time, and we enjoy some nice participation by people who watch us after we're done in the next month. And we do 3 topics, and then we'll stop after each topic and take questions, thoughts, and concerns. We have 3 topics today. We're going to start with a Republican presidential sweepstakes, such as it is. Should I just let that happen, or should I take my video off? Oh, there it goes. And then we're going to spend time on actual policy issues for a while, what's happening in Congress, and then we're going to end with a little unit on 8 Democratic governors and why you should be thinking about them. Some of them may end up being president someday. So first, let's talk about the bizarre behavior that is not uncharacteristic of the Republican Party. There's only 3 people in tier 1 in terms of people who might represent that party, which has changed somewhat over the years, might represent that party in a presidential sweepstakes next year. It's hardly a second tier at all right now. The first tier, of course, as you know, is Trump, DeSantis, and Nikki Haley. I'm going to put this in context. There is not a centrist wing of the Republican Party anymore. Many years ago, when Ronald Reagan was the year that he was nominated and picked Papa Bush as his vice president, I was working for the moderate Republican governor of Michigan, Bill Milliken, and moderate Senator Howard Baker, who had been deeply involved in Watergate, called Bill Milliken and said, if we do not unite as moderates, Ronald Reagan is going to take over the party, and we need to unite. And Howard Baker talked to Milliken and Bob Ray of Iowa and several other Republican governors, and they didn't do it. They liked Papa Bush. They thought he was a nice guy. He sent them all Christmas cards, and they ended up not unifying behind a candidate. When Reagan got the nomination, his forces massacred state parties, moderates. And from that time on, a Republican senator who attacks toward the center in almost all these states gets in trouble with his own party structure. McCain did in Arizona, and across the board, it's hard to be a Republican governor or Republican senator in the middle, and especially hard to be a Republican presidential candidate. It can happen, but the days that Jacob Javits and Charles Percy and Nelson Rockefeller are, I can promise you, when somebody like Nikki Haley says something that's slightly moderate, she's not from that wing of the party, I promise you. So the people who are sort of Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, and maybe Asa Hutchinson in Arkansas, or Sununu in New Hampshire, they're not possible successful candidates. It's possible there is a path for Nikki Haley, and I'll say some more about that. So we're just remembering that the party of Eisenhower and even, yes, Dick Dixon, except for Watergate, doesn't exist anymore. There's the other context is remember that there's really no issue right now that Republicans are debating over. The things you hear, the two things you hear the most is Joe Biden's too old to run for president is 82. You know what? They're right. He is. And Donald Trump's too old too. The second thing you hear, of course, is about wokeness, whatever that is. I was awake at 6 o'clock, so I was woke. The reason why you're hearing all this is very important, is Republicans, these candidates hold a minority position on 5 or 6 huge things: choice, banning assault weapons, Ukraine, student loans, whether we had a legitimate election, taking COVID seriously. So they have the minority position on that. The reason why they're not constantly talking about those issues is those are losing issues with independent voters. And as they have proven now in 3 consecutive elections, guess what? They're losing positions. So what are you going to run on in a general election if you're a Republican? Well, if you're Ron DeSantis, if you're Trump, you're going to run on being the most bizarre politician in recent American history. But if you're DeSantis, strangely, you're going to run on the rest of us, or some of us, being woke. Now, woke started out, as you may know, having to do with understanding that there continues to be racism in America and discrimination against people who are not white males. And so that was a term that has been coined. It gets used almost indiscriminately. There was a huge battle the other day on the Bainbridge Facebook community website that 3,000 of us are so on, and somebody was criticizing the sugar packets rule. Now in Bainbridge coffee shops, you've got to ask for a sugar package. And someone said that was a woke position, which is not true. That's not what woke means. But it was found offensive by people who heard it because they think it diminishes the original thought that some of us had, that maybe we needed to work on racism in America and sexism and homophobia. So DeSantis wants it to mean whatever he wants it to mean at a particular time. In fact, there's a novelty candidate. This is Vitek Ramaswamy, who's an inventor of criticism of woke persons, and he'll get some ink. He's an entrepreneur. DeSantis wants it to mean whatever he wants it to mean. I think it's pretty puzzling. I'm not understanding, because if I was an advisor to DeSantis, and I've advised politicians now and then, I would never start out being an outrageous jerk. It just seems to me, especially since you ultimately have to win independence. So you would do that maybe to win the primary and then tack toward the center, which I don't necessarily seem to understand. I don't know why you would use wokeness, except that you get to define what it means. In 2016, Trump won partly because some middle Americans, in part, not only did they not imagine that Democrats necessarily cared about them, or Hillary anyway, they felt that way, but they also couldn't stand hearing somebody speak Spanish on the street, or 2 men and 2 women holding hands with each other. So then they were America wasn't looking like they remembered it. Now, DeSantis has tried to have that have something to do with the third grade classroom, and don't mention that there are gay people, and it's whatever he thinks it is at that moment. And that's interesting, but not to be ignored, because right now there's a poll out there saying, how do Americans feel? Do they feel that they're woke? And 40% of Americans polled said yes, they're woke, and 25% said no, they're not woke, and the rest said it didn't matter. So maybe that will continue to be the way it is. But if it's a sledgehammer, we should know where it could land. So I think it's self-evident, just because of their personalities, that it would be easier for DeSantis to say that Kamala is woke than Joe Biden, just because Joe Biden's 80, and it's just hard to categorize it with a single word like woke. And I think it'd probably be easier to say that Gavin Newsom, being a Californian, is woke, whatever it means, than say Gretchen Whitmer. At any rate, I'm saying it's not insignificant. Eventually, we're going to have to say something that's articulate about all this stuff before Americans get the idea that we're trying to take every second grader in America and indoctrinate them as they misrepresent curriculum. So eventually we'll have to do a wokeness vulnerability analysis. The other context is that Trump will be indicted soon. Don't talk yourself into that not happening, because every signal is that it's going to happen in both Georgia and at the federal level. It'll be interesting to see what that means in terms of his candidacy. The law with regard to it disqualifying him is not very clear, the constitutional language, and I wouldn't depend on that. But it does mean that it will be even less likely that Trump will be the nominee. And that's what Nikki Haley is betting on. Nikki Haley's betting that sometime this year that Trump's candidacy will fall apart, and that she'll be in a position where people have to decide between her and DeSantis. So Trump will not go away. So that's why Nikki Haley's making the bet, because Nikki Haley thinks that Trump will be harder on DeSantis than he will be on her. And she's right about that. There's a picture there was an article back in New York Magazine, or I don't know where it was, but it was about DeSantis as a high school teacher, and how he used to go to parties that high school kids were at, and sometimes people thought that was a little creepy. That's all the article says. But Trump's already trafficking in a picture of him with a 17-year-old. So that already proves that Trump will say or do anything. At any rate, the context is who's betting on what, and Haley's betting on Trump going out after DeSantis all year long. It's interesting what Trump is saying about DeSantis. DeSantis is more moderate than him on COVID. I don't know that Americans believe that. DeSantis is pretty much a jerk on COVID, and Trump, for a while at least, helped shut down America necessarily, in my view. So let's think of the other names. Tim Scott, the African-American senator from South Carolina, is running for vice president. He's not thinking that there's going to be a groundswell. Who else? Mike Pompeo. There's one person in the world besides Mike Pompeo that would want him to be president, and that's Susan Pompeo, in my view. Maybe not, I don't know, but perhaps. Asa Hutchinson, Larry Hogan, John Sununu, they're all too much in the middle. There's one person I would ask you to keep your eye on, and that's the governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, former pharmaceutical executive, to the center of certainly of Trump and DeSantis, provable winner. Terry McAuliffe should have beat him, but did not. And so if it ever got to be just a god awful mess and they were looking for someone else besides Nikki Haley, who's offered herself as that candidate, it would be Youngkin, I think. I don't have anybody else even to suggest. Certainly not Mike Pence, bless his soul. The man worked to save the republic for which we stand, and the number of people who would vote for him because of that is near the amount of people who would vote for Pompeo. He doesn't have viability. So that's my view on the Republicans. Donald Trump is not going to be the candidate for president. They tried running at his side in 2018, 2020, and 2022. If it wouldn't make us so miserable, we should want him to be the candidate. It is proven that all that wonderful get out the vote stuff that we're all working on, we do a better job at it because Trump does rallies. That's just absolutely the case. With as awful as Herschel Walker was, which is supremely awful, we just barely won, and Trump helped us do that. So that's my story on the on Republican candidates. Let's stop for a minute and see what the areas of agreement and disagreement that we have.
Sheila.
Yeah, David, you mentioned two names. I didn't catch them. The last two names that you mentioned that you would not be possible, but maybe.
The two that you could think of besides DeSantis and Trump would be Nikki Haley surviving the early carnage, or all of them going down in the carnage where he's indicted, and then Trump draws so much blood from DeSantis that he becomes viable, which Trump would do just out of petulance alone. If they had to turn to a fourth person, that would be Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia.
That's who I was talking about. Where's Youngkin out of?
What?
Where's he out? Where's Youngkin out of? Kentucky?
He's the governor of Virginia who beat us. He beat Terry McAuliffe in the off-year election.
Right.
He's just a teeny to the center of all these other folks. He knows, that means he knows there's a constitution.
Yeah, so, but he did make a lot of hay out of parental rights in schools, which is sort of the situation that DeSantis has been doing with all this book banning.
Yeah, I think one way or another, every Republican governor has done that. Even, I don't know if Hogan has done it, but certainly Asa Hutchinson has. They're playing around at least with transgender athletes, and they're doing something to try and show that the rest of us on some part of the wokeness theme. And there's got to be a secret memo from the Republican National Committee on that. Speaking of which, first name Romney, the Ronna McDaniel, has said that you have to be on the debate stage in August. You have to say in advance that you will support whoever the Republicans nominate, which is very interesting because Pence the other day wouldn't say that about Trump, and Trump won't say that, period. So we'll see who's up there in August. That's really very interesting.
Yeah, well, Trump was into loyalty pledges too, so it's kind of like they're taking a page from his rule book.
It's interesting because it would be interesting if they ended up denying Trump.
Yeah, that would be. I agree. You have something to say?
I was just wondering, CPAC is going on, right? I mean, is there anything going to come out of that will give us
simultaneously CPAC and the donor meeting for the Club for Growth are going on at the same time. So all the gossip is Trump and several other candidates, not DeSantis, are at CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Conference, which used to be the thing, but the chair of it has been accused of sexual harassment, same-sex sexual harassment, which is even harder for Republicans to talk about. And so at any rate, Trump's mad at Club for Growth. Club for Growth is all about Fox TV and DeSantis. So the internecine warfare is excellent at this point.
Yeah.
The nice thing about it being excellent is sometimes you'll have that and it'll be destined to go away, and then everybody will sound like they always thought the other person was a statesman. This isn't like that. Nikki Haley's not drawing any blood that she can't band-aid, but DeSantis will and Trump is. So that's really quite nice.
Judy, do you want to say something?
No, thank you. Not now.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
It
we're gonna
looks
move
like-
on to the.
It
go
looks
ahead,
like Christine has something.
Oh,
Christina,
Christine.
you're muted, Christine.
I just wanted to say real quick, being in Maryland, yes, Larry Hogan, if we had an ideal Republican candidate who we would all be okay with as Democrats, it would be Larry Hogan. He ran this very democratic state wonderfully, and people love him around here.
Was there, back when I was working for a Milliken in Michigan, who was George Romney's successor, there were 8 Republican governors like that. We had one here, Dan Evans, who was, these folks ran as environmentalists and compassionate moderates with fiscal care. And it's just that part. I'm just here to tell you that party absolutely does not exist anymore. When Reagan Dunn lost for the pleasure of running against Kim Schreier, he could have run to the center of whatever the name of it is, that guy who lost, and chose not to. So there's a reason people don't do that. They don't win lately. So
Yeah.
let's go on to some issues if we're ready to leave behind the Republican candidates. It'll be interesting. Of what I've said that I would most remember is there's not a chance that we're going to be able to get through the next election without having intervention at the school board level be a political issue. And whatever we think about wokeicity and how stupid it is, we do not have the opportunity to pretend to call it a non-issue, even though it is. It's a made-up issue. They're talking to Americans about things that are not real, but we don't have the political opportunity to ignore it, in my view. So I want to talk about, for our second segment of 3, I want to quickly talk about 2 issues. We still have a half an hour. Nothing's going to happen in Congress this year. As you know, we're all thrilled that before McCarthy took over, we were able to get some major legislation on infrastructure, on carbon, for a while on child poverty, on competitiveness with China. It's really an amazing 2 years. And for all the Democrats hate Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, they made it possible. So I'm here to say I'm not one of the people who stabs them with a voodoo pin each night. Ukraine, lately you will have noticed that a band of Republicans has been taking shots at the policy on Ukraine. That's not going to go anywhere either, because there's too many Republicans who are hawks on defense and who were trained at the side of Danny Bush and others to not be a lover of whoever runs the Russia, including this thug. And so they can have all the resolutions they want, where 50 Republican congressmen pass resolutions on accountability of spending, and it's not going anywhere. For one thing, Mitch McConnell has Biden's back on it. Mitch McConnell feels the same way that Biden does. For another thing, so does Mike McCall, who's head of the Republican head of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And it's not a coincidence that those Republican congressmen showed up the day after in Kyiv, the day after Biden did. Biden knew they talk, and that was a coordinated effort to get behind Zelensky and to parry the various resolutions about no blank check. So McCarthy, to please the Matt Getzes of the world, will continue to say no blank check, and they'll continue to give arms to Zelensky. And there's really not a solution except some kind of talks. Ukraine doesn't have the armaments to drive Russia all the way out of Ukraine, and Putin's not leaving, and Putin doesn't have the horsepower to get tanks into Kyiv, and NATO wouldn't let him do it. So that's where we stand. But in terms of what's happening on China, China has $1 trillion of our debt, of our 30 trillion, and China has mammoth investment in the United States. And when Joe Biden says we're going to sanction you if you start being a primary weapons provider to Russia, that's a serious thing to say to China, because they're much more integrated in our economy than Russia is. It's a much bigger deal than the #2 economic power in the world. It would be bad for us, I promise you. We do sanctions on China, the market's going to go down 10%, but I wouldn't doubt that Biden would do it. And so that's going to keep China trying to, China is brandishing, but I think the tools to keep them from becoming an awful player are there. So that leaves the big issue from spring to summer to be the debt limit. We've talked about it a little bit. I think the issue for us today is, what's the end game? How are we going to get done? And I think we already know that. So here's how it's going to get done. The Democratic language is that they want a clean resolution, a clean bill increasing the budget ceiling. Clean bill means no attachments of budget cuts and this and that. And their argument is, we've already spent this money. We have to authorize the borrowing because we authorized the spending that created the need to borrow. So that's of course, that isn't what happened in 2011. They had a side deal. So that's what will happen if anything happens, which it will. There'll be a side deal. So the Democrats will say, this is not conditional. We're passing the debt ceiling. And if they pass the debt ceiling increase, the side deal won't be in the same bill. The Republicans will say, you can say that all you want, but this side deal is, we wouldn't vote for the debt ceiling increase if we didn't have this other bill doing some Medicaid cuts and some cuts in discretionary spending, and maybe a few cuts in defense, not on Ukraine. So what that means is Republicans take Medicare and Social Security off the table because Joe Biden nailed them in the State of the Union. And so McCarthy takes it off the table immediately, and then they go back and punch out Rick Scott for ever raising it in the first place. It's been awful for them on that score. And then they see what promise cuts in the future they can make. It's dicey for this reason. On the actual resolutions, what McCarthy is sworn to do is not pass anything where he doesn't have the majority of the majority. So he could drop 40 votes on the debt limit, and Hakeem Jeffries, our minority leader, would give him 60 votes if the cuts were palatable, and that's how you get it in the House. So that's doable. He doesn't have to get every Republican to pass that resolution. Here's the rub. As you remember, he promised that anybody who wanted to could hold a vote of confidence on whether he should be speaker. So he can get the votes from Hakeem Jeffries for the right package. But then Matt or one of the crazies can go right back and call for a vote on whether he should continue to be speaker. So here's where it gets exciting. If they do that, Hakeem Jeffries won't save it. So it's one thing to give him 40 votes on the debt ceiling. It's another thing to intervene in a Republican squabble over who should be Speaker of the House. Hakeem Jeffries would just let him roast. The reason why Republicans are reluctant to do that is they don't have another candidate. Whatever McCarthy agrees to, Scalise would agree to too. So what would be the point of executing McCarthy? What will bring this all to a head? The fear that they don't have any way to resolve it except a last minute showdown. And that's precipitated by such a huge fear that they're going to default, that the market will drop 5%, you know, the Dow will drop 1,500 points in 3 days. And then everybody in the world who has a 401k will call their or a IRA will call and say, excuse me, well, some of my retirement is in the market. Could you resolve this stupid conflict? So that's the only thing will happen. They won't default. They know they can't. And McCarthy doesn't want them to default. The other reason he doesn't want them to default, of course, is people remember this, and this is already setting up as a 70-30 thing where 70% of the people will blame the Republicans and 30% the Democrats. And that's not going to change. As long as Joe Biden minds his P's and Q's, it won't change. Comments on these two issues, Ukraine and the budget?
No,
No comments?
no. Yes, I know your screen was going weird again there, David. There you go. You're back. You're normal again.
Yeah. No comments or questions on this? Okay, I'm going to go on to issue 3rd then. So this is, I'm going to name 8 Republican governors. Christina will get all these if she's still on. Yeah, there she is. Before I talk about these 8 Republican governors, you can tell me what states they're from, okay? Everybody ready? You can unmute yourself if you want to play.
Yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
Sheila.
Wisconsin, Tony Evers.
Yeah, no, I'm talking only about governors who are consequential in running for president. He's lucky.
Oh, running for president. Oh,
Yeah,
you
he
didn't
does.
say that. I did not understand
Possibly.
that.
Okay, Roy Cooper. Okay, Roy Cooper is
The Maryland guy.
No, Roy Cooper is North Carolina.
No, I know,
Newsom-
but the
Gavin
Maryland
Newsom
guy.
is from where? Gavin Newsom.
California.
Okay, Westmore.
Oh,
Maryland.
Maryland.
That's Maryland.
Maryland.
Christina's muted. She knows her governor. Gretchen Whitmer.
Michigan.
Michigan.
Josh Shapiro,
Pennsylvania.
new governor of Pennsylvania. Jay Inslee lives down
Somewhere.
the street. J.B. Pritzker,
Pritzker. Oh, Pritzker.
Illinois.
Illinois. Phil Murphy.
Who?
Phil Murphy.
Perfect.
Phil Murphy.
You're gonna hurt his mom and dad's feelings.
New Jersey. New Jersey.
Okay, so think about these 8 people. So first, think about our field this last time, almost all senators plus Pete Buttigieg. Think about the fact that the Senate is not as popular as governors. Think about the fact that Amy Klobuchar has got to run for re-election next time, so probably won't run for president. Think that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are probably not going to run again either. And think that you may only have Cory Booker from that field. Think that maybe Buttigieg is a little bit disadvantaged by being transportation secretary.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I'm sorry to hurt your feelings. Sometimes the truth comes out, Sheila. And you
Oh,
just
it
have
doesn't feel good though, David.
That's the disadvantage of being a cabinet secretary is never let a train derail us.
Yeah, that
I'm not gonna let up
Palestine.
a Pete.
Palestine was they're really going after him after that, and
Well,
that's not
unfairly,
fair. Not fair.
So,
really.
yeah.
Unfortunately, because it's a huge lie because actually it happened during Trump's time when they deregulated the whole damn thing, and it's not up to Pete at all.
Well, both things are true. And as I said in my blog this last week, titled Trump derails causes toxic spill. I mean, this is outrageous for him to go there after being against rules on train safety is beyond the pale.
And he
Think about
gives them
these-
Trump water.
Mhm.
He
Yeah,
gave them
that's right.
bottles of Trump water. I mean, the guy is a marketer constantly.
So which of these 8 would be vice president if Joe Biden does decide to run? Reed's telling me that I need to walk back. Joe Biden won't run, and I haven't yet because I still don't think Joe Biden's running. I think
Okay.
but Reed will remind me this fall as the campaign gets in full swing.
I mean,
hope he does-
we said
I hope he
earlier that
doesn't run.
we said earlier that David was getting everything right.
Yeah,
I
so
think-
far.
But I think I think that Biden, I mean, it's very hard to not run for president after you've been president.
That's
Yes,
true.
but if you're 82 and you get up in the morning and your bones are aching.
Yeah.
So here's the story. Somebody wrote to me after I wrote my blog and said that he shouldn't run. Somebody wrote to me and said, you're feeding the other side a line for their campaign. And I thought, you mean they're not going to know Joe Biden's 82 unless we tell them? That's good luck on that. I think they're going to know.
Yeah.
At any rate, which of these 8 people would run for vice president if Joe Biden asked them? And,
Gretchen Whitmer.
I think probably all 8.
Oh, okay.
Gretchen Whitmer was just elected, so it's a free run for her. She can run without being resigning as governor of Michigan. So people would be especially interested in that job if Joe Biden runs because he'll be 82. So they can think,
That's
what
true.
happened to William Henry Harrison, my
Yeah.
great grandpa? So that at any rate, they would all do that. Which of them is interested in being president? Well, Wes Moore eventually, but he's 42. Gavin Newsom is very interested, but I don't think the country's interested in Gavin
No,
Newsom.
they're not
The time
interested in
has
California.
come where people are not thinking that California is an advantage. I don't think Jay Inslee would mind being president, but I haven't heard that he's heading in that direction. I really think the person for you to watch is twofold. Is Gretchen Whitmer, who's saying no, but in a way that might mean yes. She just got a good margin in Michigan, as Tom Kilbane will know. She did better with organized labor than Democrats have done lately, although she was running against a pure nutcase.
Yep.
But she got organized labor, which is essential. So I think she's a real candidate. And the other emerging candidate is J.B. Pritzker. J.B. Pritzker is a Pritzker, so he's a billionaire. He would be our billionaire. And I don't think provably Americans have disqualified billionaires from being candidates. He's a basic Illinois liberal. He's not a progressive and he's not a moderate. He's an Illinois liberal. He's not photogenic, but he's doing pretty well. He'd be able to fund the early part of his campaign, especially if Biden doesn't. He's not going to run against Biden, but if Biden doesn't run, I would not be surprised to see J.B. Pritzker coming in.
Okay.
Yes, Jane.
I'm assuming that you think that Kamala Harris would not be vice presidential running mate.
I shouldn't have said it that way because I don't think Joe Biden would walk away from Kamala Harris. I don't think, I felt pretty good about Joe selecting her. There was Klobuchar and there were other options. I was pretty impressed by Klobuchar in the debates. I thought she was quite well spoken.
Mm.
I agree with Sheila that so was Mayor Pete. But I think Kamala Harris has been disadvantaged by starting in Kamala Harris in the COVID era. As I said before on this screen, that I've seen her 20 times, 6 steps behind the president in a mask. And I remember Biden getting special opportunities when Obama was president to be in a good situation. So Kamala gets to go to the border, and I just don't think it's worked that well. But I don't think Joe Biden would walk away from her. I guess there's a possibility that if they thought she was polling awfully, that he could convince her to voluntarily walk away. But I don't think that's going to happen. I do think she has a problem winning. If Joe doesn't run, I don't think that nomination is hers for the asking. I think it wouldn't keep Weber or Pritzker or Cory Booker or Buttigieg from jumping in.
Mhm.
That's my view. What's your view?
Not Cory Booker. No.
Jane, when you asked the question, what were you thinking?
Well, because you were presenting options for
Yeah.
vice presidential candidate, and I hadn't heard
Yeah,
why you
beyond-
thought she would not be there. I agree. She's been disappointing, and I was really happy to see her come and for him to choose her as vice president, but she's been disappointing. She's not very strong.
it's really hard. I'll tell you, I mean, it's a surprise since Biden had these, has followed how this worked through 40 years. It's surprising that his people haven't helped her get more traction. That's
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do. And it's certainly, for the most part, excuse me, what Obama did for Biden.
Mhm.
On the other hand, Biden had a lot to bring to the table for Obama, including being better at working with the Senate.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say on the Democratic candidates. Again, somebody who knows, who you could envision at a backyard barbecue where you couldn't John Kerry or Al Gore or Hillary Clinton. It's funny, I went to see Al Gore years after that at some Democratic event. I could imagine him at a barbecue. He was great. It's just he came across as so stiff. And we have a way of nominating stiff people. So we have to figure out which of these people are not stiff. Other than that, we have to not be vulnerable on what has clearly become their number one issue, even beyond immigration and beyond Joe's age. The number one issue is their inference that every day of the week, Democratic electeds are looking for ways to indoctrinate your 7-year-old.
Mhm.
I know that
Amazing.
it seems crazy, but that's
Yeah.
where the campaign is heading.
Yeah, well, it's bottom up, I remember seeing this actually play out probably 30 years ago in a school district I was in California, where a particular group didn't want a book series, and they were passing around pamphlets with lies in it. And I was working for the school district that time, and I said, you can go up and look at the books. And my neighbor wouldn't refuse to go look at them.
Yeah,
This is the book. So this movement has been working for a long time.
yeah,
There's
and
nothing-
certainly on the censorship side and
Oh,
on
yeah.
and on curriculum review. The heck of it is neither of those are the province of the United States Congress or the president. So you
Yeah.
could see it a little bit more if it was what was happening. If it was what was happening in a governor's race, even, it would make a little bit more sense. But it's bizarre. But then again, it's not the only bizarre thing to talk about today. It's just in the top 10. It's a good time in America in that we, as I said in my blog, first we were in the hole, the deep hole, and then we climbed out of the hole, and now we're inching away from the hole. But I can't promise you we won't fall back in. So we have to win the presidency 2 years from now. We have to win the House back. And the hardest of the three things is to defend in the Senate because 2/3 of the senators who are up are from are Democrats, and several of them from swing states, including Manchin and John Tester. And next time we'll take that up a little bit. But winning all the Senate races we would have to win is going to be a push. It's hard. Questions, thoughts, insults on any of these matters?
Tom, you wanted to say something earlier.
Yeah, I just saw before you came on, David, that they took something off of Biden's chest. And it was cancerous,
Oh,
and that would give him, the opportunity to step away. He needs, he needs to have some reason not to run, and that would be not a perfect reason. Another thing that just came out was Kennedy, Robert Kennedy III, or one of the Kennedy kids, was thinking about being a Democrat candidate. So that was interesting. These are
I get my Kennedy grandchildren mixed up. Of course, one of them is awful on vaccines, but I don't remember which is which. But that would be interesting to have an all new name. When Carolyn Kennedy put her hat in the ring, not a hat in the ring, toe near the ring, she got all sorts of pushback. But of course, again, I'm mixed up, but there's been 2-3 Kennedys who have been Congress people. We couldn't stand a new candidate. Remember, the number of Americans who were around when Jack Kennedy was president is a smaller as 60 years ago. Other thoughts or questions? I think we just have to, I feel like we're in a little bit of a lull. I certainly feel that way with my blog. I feel like people, maybe Indivisible and others, are not thinking that way, but it sure seems like people are slowing down and watching Republicans battle Republicans. And if so, we better get going.
Yeah, well, Rita wants to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I was reading where down in Florida, where at that new community college, where DeSantis took 6 trustees off, appointed his buddy is the head of it.
I know.
Doubled or tripled his salary. And I'm just going, he's in Florida, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe people across the whole country, are going to say this is okay and this is how we want government
I'm
to
outraged. I'm like,
And-
how can a governor do that?
Well,
I mean, that's a board at a college.
it depends on the laws of the state who controls the.
Right.
I've
But
never heard of that before.
I
So
was just pretty taken back. I was pretty
the
taken
rest
back.
of that is, first, there's whether a governor can do it, and then why a governor would want to do it. So what puzzles me is I could see DeSantis with his big victory in Florida against a not very good candidate, because Floridians thought that Charlie Crist was washed up.
Right.
And he was, apparently. So I can't see why DeSantis is running as a jerk. Maybe because he is a jerk, who knows? I don't
I think he
understand.
is.
I don't understand it as a matter of political strategy. But we'll find out. We'll find out more. And the nice thing about that is you already know that Donald Trump will say anything. So if there's anything to be said about DeSantis, you could bet that, some of the stuff Trump's saying so far is pretty lame. Like, DeSantis is a Republican in name only. If there's anyone who is in the mainstream of conservatism, he's not. So to try and call DeSantis a moderate is, where would you get that? And then to criticize him for Trump to try and go to the right of DeSantis on COVID seems bizarre, but that's what Trump is doing. What Trump is doing that will get traction is all these slurs about hanging out with 17-year-olds is not good. That's not good for DeSantis. Final thoughts from our wise assembly.
Well, all I know is that the teachers and the students at that school are not happy with the governor right now. So
Well,
DeSantis.
there's still a lawsuit from Martha's Vineyard about dropping from social
Yeah.
welfare advocates on Martha's Vineyard. We'll see what kind of trouble he gets into, but remember, just like with Trump, a certain amount of that trouble is what they're seeking.
Yeah.
So DeSantis would cry buckets full that if he's doing it on purpose, he knows that. he
Oh,
can
yeah.
push back.
He's
Well,
doing it
they-
for the base. Yeah,
They-
Sheila.
They would go after new school down there in Florida easily because it is a progressive school like Bennington or Goddard, or you name
But
it.
it's not a state university, is it?
It's not, yeah, it is. It's a public university.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, the taxes are being paid there, and that's how he could pull these big guys.
Mhm.
Pull the guys
The-
out off of the board and put his own people in, plus the head of the school.
The new president of the University of Florida, having resigned being a senator from Nebraska, is Ben Sass, which is interesting because Sass is a sassy man. He's not gonna let Ron DeSantis do anything with the University of Florida. It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
So
Okay, anybody else?
good times. Let's see each
Yeah.
other again soon.
Yeah, it
Thank
was
you,
so good. David, we will
Thank
see you
you.
next month.
That's a deal.
We always keep you, keep your ideas. You know,
Good
we have this
times.
on a recording, so we can hold you accountable.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so far, so good.